Welcome back aboard USS Cod. I'm Cod President Paul Ferrace, and today we have another somber story to tell. A little earlier you heard the two-part story of how we lost one of our crewmen, Andrew Gordon Johnson, washed overboard fighting a fire in the after torpedo room. Well, death came to Cod twice that day. In the middle of the night we lose Johnson overboard, and Mr. Lawrence Foley fought valiantly to keep his shipmate afloat in the water since Johnson couldn't swim for 6 hours. Unfortunately, we didn't find Mr. Foley for 7 hours, so sadly Johnson slipped off his back into the deep and was lost. Later that afternoon, we had a second death occur, but this was a Japanese prisoner who was fished out of the water a few days earlier in the north end of the Formosa Straits when Cod attacked a small convoy. There was a large troop ship and a couple of escorts, one of them being W-41, a mine layer escort. We all know that the Japanese were desperately short of anti-submarine and escort vessels, so anything that could afloat and carry depth charges was pressed into service to escort their small convoys and serve as anti-submarine warfare vessels. Well, in the night attack, Cod hit W-41, the mine layer. She exploded and sank, and Cod was more interested in getting the troop transport, so we roared ahead into the dark trying to find the troop transport. It disappeared. We couldn't find her. But coming back through the debris field, we discovered that there were quite a few survivors in the water. And as it was often the practice, you wanted to get a prisoner for intelligence purposes. Now, the chance that you might fish Admiral Yamamoto out of the water were very slim to none, since he was shot down in 1942. But you know, the intelligence guys ashore sometimes would dispute your claims for sinking. But if you had a prisoner, well, how do you dispute that? So coming through the debris field, there were a number of men in the water, a lot of debris. Most of them were dead. And those that were still alive, as we came in slowly with the bow planes down, crewmen on deck, trying to coax some of these men aboard, or at least one of them, they swam further away from the Cod. Some the injured ones began drinking the oil on the water to make themselves vomit so they wouldn't be taken prisoners, you know, the Bushido Code. But one of the men in the water was pretty badly injured, and he couldn't put up any fight or resist. He couldn't drink any of the oil in the water. He couldn't swim away. And he was taken aboard and brought up on deck. Now, we had our pharmacist mate was brought up to quickly evaluate the people that might come aboard. And our pharmacist mate looked at this guy and immediately diagnosed severe internal injuries. In fact, the man pulled out of the water wearing a life jacket, a K-POC life jacket and some clothing, was making the universal symbol for "please shoot me." The captain was informed that this man had suffered some severe internal injuries from an unknown reason, perhaps our torpedo exploding, and that he was asking to be basically euthanized. Well, our captain, Captain Atkins, said, "Pump him full of morphine, maybe he'll get better, take him below." So since he was the only pickings for the prisoners, the man was brought below, and his belongings, he was stripped of his clothing, he was covered in oil, so he was cleaned up, and he was tended by our pharmacist mate back aft in the crew berthing space. There's a bunk there next to the medical cabinet, and that was the designated bunk for medical treatments. Well, it turns out the man's name was Petty Officer Jun Arima of the Imperial Japanese Navy. And among his artifacts, or among his items in his possession, was a photo. And I have one here, and this, of course, is a picture of, this is Johnson and his mother and his little brother. This is Petty Officer Arima and his mother. And if you look, and certainly Evan will insert a picture here, it's actually a three shot, because Petty Officer Arima's brother, we assume, member of the Imperial Japanese Army, is flanking Mom in the photo, and Mom is obviously crying. But anyway, so we had that picture, along with some paperwork was pulled out of the water. I think a little magazine, the Japanese equivalent of Reader's Digest, and a postcard, a blank postcard or two, that apparently he might have intended to send a message home that never was sent. But so Petty Officer Arima is languishing in his bunk. He's really unresponsive. He's in excruciating pain, and again is repeating this plea for to be put out of his misery. So a large amount of opiates are pumped into him. He's given shots of morphine to calm him and put him out of his pain. He is given an IV drip to feed. He's bathed, of course, of the oil and cleaned up as best we can. But he languishes. He never really comes out of this stupor. I mean, the morphine wears off every 4 hours, and he begins moaning and groaning. And of course, the men in the after battery trying to sleep, it's not exactly great for morale. And of course, the whole drama of the burning torpedo in the after room on the night of April 26, that occurs, and then of course we lose Johnson. We almost lose the entire submarine. But after Mr. Foley is recovered, and the bad news about losing Mr. Johnson kind of permeates through the boat, the pharmacist mate informs the captain that it's now been 2.5, perhaps 3 days, that the decline in the patient is getting more pronounced, and the pharmacist mate predicted that he had only hours to live, and they had pumped him with so much morphine and IV drips that just wasn't doing any good. As we believe, he was injured, as it turns out, by his own ship's depth charges exploding. This was a common practice among Japanese anti-submarine vessels. Rather than set their depth charges to safe, they would preset them, usually to a shallow depth setting, 35 or 50 feet, which certainly would allow you to fire them quickly on detection of a submarine. But if you yourself were sunk, then you had the danger of killing survivors with your own depth charges, and we believe that was pretty much the case with mine layer W41. That although he survived the initial torpedoing, and as did many of the survivors, when that ship sank about 35, 40, 50 feet below the surface, the depth charges on deck began exploding. And that likely is what caused severe internal bleeding on Petty Officer Arima. In fact, the pharmacist mate said that his abdomen was badly swollen and indicated internal bleeding. So rather than have the crew have to drag a corpse from the after battery to the forward torpedo room, the captain suggested that perhaps Petty Officer Arima be brought to a bunk in the forward room while he was still alive, for morale purposes on the crew. And that was done. He was carried hammock style through the boat to the forward room, where they continued to administer morphine, and the pharmacist mate was taking pulse readings and checking his breathing. And on the afternoon of April 27th, he breathed his last in the forward torpedo room. Now, as was practice for ships in the time, if a crewman died, you were shrouded in your fart sack, the covering around your mattress. And if you'll refer back to an earlier program we did on opening up one of our flash cover mattresses and comparing it with the mattress from a surface enlisted man's bunk roll, you certainly know something about fart sacks. Well, Petty Officer Arima was not part of ship's company, so he didn't have a fart sack. He didn't have a bunk, and no one was willing to part with theirs for a member of the enemy's Navy. So Captain Adkins ordered the pharmacist mate to requisition some sheets from the officer's linen supply, prepare and reefer the body for burial at sea. Captain Adkins was adamant on giving him a proper burial at sea. So the pharmacist mate took the sheets, and in his own words to me, he said, "I did a rather quick and dirty job." He said, I reefered the body. They had a seaman's service in the after battery, and then when conditions were permitted, they opened the forward escape trunk hatch, the upper hatch, and they took the reefered body of Arima. They wrapped a rope around the midsection and began hoisting him up vertically through the past the ladder through the hatch. And the pharmacist mate was present to help with the process. And he said, "I realized how sloppy of a job I did on reefering the body." He said, when just as the feet came past my face, he said the feet popped out from below the sheet shroud. But he said he kind of shoved the feet up, and he said as the feet passed up above his head, he said, the thought occurred to me that perhaps I should have stuffed the rectum with cotton wadding, just as the contents of the rectum emptied on his face. So blood and feces on the face of our pharmacist mate. Now, we'll pause for a moment, and I will say that the Petty Officer June Arima's body was brought topside and committed to the deep. But back down in the torpedo room, the pharmacist mate said that the next thing he knew, he was in the officer's shower. And he said, you know, 4 sets of arms were ripping his clothes off. He was getting hit with hot water, soap, aqua velva, all simultaneously. And I asked him, I said, you know, even though that's a trip of only about 20 feet, you know, I said, how do you do that in an emergency when you've got a face covered with god-awful whatever? And he said, my feet never touched the ground. I guess they grabbed him when they saw what happened and kind of threw him like a bucket brigade and got him in the shower. And we'll do a little close-up of the shower perhaps. And again, washed him up really good. So in a way, you might say that Petty Officer Arima had his revenge on the cod for his death. But, you know, it's a poignant reminder that, you know, here we have 2 photos, one of our lost crewman and a mother whose heart was broken when she got the news that her son wasn't ever going to come home. And, of course, we have Mrs. Arima, who, of course, was heartbroken when she realized that her son would never come back from the sea. And, you know, 2 mothers on opposite sides of a political divide, and in fact the world paid the highest and most painful price in war. So we try to remember Petty Officer Arima. We tell that story. It's a little gross at the end, but you know, I'm struck by the fact that we tried so. I'm struck by the fact that unlike Japanese who captured Americans and executed them for the most part, I'm struck by the amount of effort taken to treat Petty Officer Arima. I mean, the morphine to ease his pain, and the internal the IV drip that he was given. It shows the humanity to another seafarer provided by the COD crew. And we remember that story on COD. It's part of our history. It's part of our interpretation, even though the end can be a little gross. But anyway, I hope you've gotten something from this. I know we are very proud of the fact that we tried to save the life of an enemy crewman. And it's just one of the fascinating bits of history that don't really come across in the patrol reports, but having the wonderful ability to talk to the crewmen who were there and participated in this. Especially our pharmacist mate who told the story over a banquet dinner at one of our reunions. I was absolutely fascinated by that incredible story, gross as it was. The other 6 people at the dining room table there present, not so much. But anyway, so that's our offering today. Again, death comes to COD twice, and luckily has passed us over ever since. So the story of 2 mothers, their hearts broken. Remember to hit the like, subscription button, hit the notification bell, and we'll come back with more. Thank you.